Did you know that imposter syndrome affects up to 70% of the population? That's wild. I didn't actually know that until I delved into the rabbit hole of imposter syndrome, and I found that it's actually widely spread amongst the autistic community. And now that makes so much sense to me because it is something I've experienced personally, and it's also something that I've seen many people who go on this journey, like I've been on, go through to. And some of the things that I found suggested that if you experience autism, and as valid as that is, exclusively on its own, if it is not coupled with an intellectual disability, it's more likely that you may be questioned in your experience because to other people it's just not as obvious, or it's not as etched in their mind as to what they think autism is. And this can be really quite invalidating, but it can also be quite challenging when you may already still be struggling with your sense of acceptance and your sense of identity when you have spent a lifetime being up against not quite fitting in. And even though getting the diagnosis of autism helps to explain things in a way where you're like, that makes so much sense in comparison to anything else I've ever considered. And I've gone through all of the hoops, and I was diagnosed by a professional who knows what they're talking about. It's still likely that you can go back and forward in your journey of questioning, am I? And I also think it's worth acknowledging that this makes sense if you are late diagnosed, because you may at the beginning of your journey have wondered, like, am I? And you kind of go down that and start doing that endless amount of years of research that I know we've all done. But then you wonder, do I belong in this community? Will I be accepted in this community? Am I? Like you question yourself, am I? Is it the thing? Because if it is, why has it taken till now to be noticed in that way and it to be acknowledged and validated now? Why has it taken this amount of time? So I think that that's really kind of a valid thing as well as to why you might be experiencing imposter syndrome. But I also noticed that as I was looking at some of the reasons why, or some of the reasons that would indicate you are more likely to suffer with imposter syndrome, I also noticed that these are also quite exclusive to autism, and many autistic people experience these things. So if you can imagine those things kind of interlinked and coupled together, they make a lot of sense as to if you are listening and you experience any of these, you may well also be experiencing imposter syndrome. And it's important to acknowledge that because it's important to do something about that. I think that the thing that this is a personal one that I kind of wrote down, but I didn't see it when I was researching it. I think another reason why autistic people and the autistic community may feel like an imposter to the autistic community is if they've become a master of masking. And masking is one of those terms that I think that we all know fairly well, and we know how to spot it and how to do something with it. If you don't, please do comment and let me know. But if you have become the master of masking, and I don't mean that everyone has been super accepting of you, and that could well be the case, but what I mean is that you have learned from a very young age that acceptance, love, connection is attached to your camouflaging or you minimizing parts of yourself in order to be accepted, and show things that you've learned and observed that others do, it's likely that you are going to always have that question mark above your head about where is it that I belong, and am I an imposter? And I think that's not your fault. I think that is due to your experiences. And I don't think I know one person who is autistic who hasn't gone through that experience where they are encouraged to be neurotypical because the world is set up in a neurotypical way, and anything neurodiverse and neurodivergent is seen as not different but bad, and you are encouraged and praised quite possibly if you minimize that or try to delete that from your personality in any regard. Something else I found is that some of the things that would make you more likely to suffer with imposter syndrome is things like if you are a woman of colour, and even if you are a millennial. And again, I will input some pictures to show you what was found, and that men do experience imposter syndrome just like women do. But I think that if you are accepted into a community of any kind, whether that is the autistic community or it's a place of work or a place or you achieve something or you do something, and there's not a lot of representation of people like you, and I don't just mean physically, although it is physically too, it would be how you feel in yourself, in the sense of, do you feel quite alien to other people? It's likely that you're going to question your position there. And I think that's something really important to acknowledge. And if you've just been othered in any way, like marginalised or ostracised, you're going to constantly be questioning yourself because of your experiences, because you haven't had that acceptance without conditions before. And some of the other things I found is that people who are highly sensitive are more neurotic, so more likely to experience and be prone to anxiety, are more likely to suffer with imposter syndrome. But I know what you're thinking. That sounds like a lot of autistic people I know, if not all. And I guess those two things coupled together, it makes sense, doesn't it? And the other thing is that having high levels of perfectionism in you and in your personality is something that they see in people who have imposter syndrome. And I think, just like the thing I just said previously, is the reasons why it's so prevalent in the autistic community, because I see this a lot. I see that they are naturally going to be more sensitive, maybe due to just how they are, but also due to the experiences they've had where they are more likely to be criticised or rejected. And perfectionism, I guess, kind of comes in along with the masking, which is that I will be accepted, or I hope to be accepted, or I hope to be loved if I start to do things perfectly. And we have this unrealistic bar and expectation set for ourselves where we believe that if we just achieve that, then the thing that lives on the other side of that is that we are good enough and that we will be accepted and that we will belong and we will have this sense of security there. But unfortunately, perfectionism and perfection in general is a really unrealistic standard and a hard thing to not just achieve but maintain. And then any slip down from that space can be really damaging to your sense of self and your self-esteem. And again, that's a really important thing to know. But yeah, I'm curious, what other things do you believe are the reasons why autistic people are more prone to experiencing imposter syndrome, even though I have to acknowledge that imposter syndrome isn't just exclusively in the autistic community, but it is prevalent in the autistic community. Please let me know if you found this insightful. Please let me know if you have experienced any of these things. I will be back soon with more videos on these topics.